I was within and without simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life. This is a quote from The Great Gatsby, Chapter 2.
Welcome to the 20th Century Book Quest, the podcast where we discuss books of the last century to help you curate your own list of great books.
And in this episode, we are continuing our exploration of the lost generation with a certified literary gem, The Great Gatsby. The question being, who is Gatsby?
So thank you for joining. Grab a nice cup of tea and enjoy.
And as always, help us help more readers by leaving a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcast. So, who is Gatsby?
That's a very good question. A question that has many answers, as Gatsby is a very complex and rich character. One of the answers is that he is a product and a reflection of the Roaring Twenties. So America, after the First World War, experienced a period of economic prosperity. Industrial production soared, consumer spending increased. It was actually the first time that people were encouraged to buy products, small products, on credit. So you could buy your ticket to go to the movie on credit, or your first washing machine on credit. It's also the time of technological innovations, like I said. It's the time of automobile, of washing machine, radio, and it transformed people's daily life.
Okay, and this is actually something that we can see a lot in The Great Gatsby,
yes.
Particularly the cars.
Yeah.
Because it's actually an element that has a very important role in how the plot turns out in the end.
However, even though it was a period of economic prosperity, there was still a divide between classes. And it is illustrated in the book with the divide between old money and new money and new people who became rich before, after the Second World War.
Yeah, they didn't have the same habits, and this is very clear in the opposition between Gatsby, who is very rich, but also Daisy, who is rich as well, but of older money, and she's got different connections.
Yes, and there is also a geographical divide, with East Egg and West Egg in Long Island. East Egg being
the more fashionable of the two.
Yes, where old money lived. It's also a period of cultural revolution. After the war, you have a real rejection of Victorian norms and a celebration of youth and modernity. It's the beginning of jazz music, of dances like the Charleston. It's the rise of the flapper culture. So it's a real booming period in terms of culture as well. It's also the time of prohibition. So prohibition was the ban on the sale, production, and transportation of alcohol. I recently learned that prohibition began for soldiers. When soldiers came back from the war, they were forbidden from buying alcoholic drinks. So it started with them, and then in 1920 it became prohibition, which did not work at all, because not only did people not stop drinking, but it helped the development of speakeasies, of organized crime. And you can really see this with Gatsby's parties, where alcohol just is everywhere.
Flowing.
Yeah,
absolutely. And also, I mean, I had not remembered that prohibition was actually that it was the time of prohibition, because you've got all these parties, but this explains why there is a scene towards the end where one of the characters takes a bottle of whiskey or something and wraps it into a towel.
Yeah.
And I had not realized that it was just to hide it, basically.
Yeah. You also have a lot of social changes during this period. You have a shift in gender roles, in the attitudes towards sexuality and racial dynamics. It's the start of more rights for women. 1920s, when women got the right to vote in the US. You have a challenging of traditional gender norms. Women started working a little bit, especially during the First World War, even though after the war, every woman was expected to get married and have children and take care of the family. But they had a little bit more liberty. And also it was seen in their clothes. The dresses were shorter and the hair was also shorter. And it's also the period of the Harlem Renaissance, during when African Americans asserted their cultural identity. And it's the beginning of the civil rights movement.
Yeah. And strangely enough, it's quite absent from the Great Gatsby.
Yes, totally.
So it's clear that
even though it takes place in New York.
Even though it takes place in New York, but actually it's simply because, I guess, this is all set against a background of wealth.
Yeah.
And so these people were totally isolated from these other social problems. Yeah. And it does not appear at all in the novel.
Yeah. A character that is a good example of social change, I think, is Jordan. She's a young woman in early 20s.
Yeah. She's something like 21 in the story, I think.
And she's a professional golfer. So she's not married. She's not living on her own because I think she lives with her aunt. And she seems very free and free-spirited.
Yeah.
She goes to those parties.
And in total control of her life.
Yes, exactly.
Even of what people could say of her.
Yeah.
Because there's a hint at some point that she might have cheated during a tournament, but actually nothing came out of it. So.
Yeah.
Interesting character, this one.
Yeah, she's very interesting. And another important aspect of this period is the stock market boom. It was the decade of a speculative boom in the stock market and with rising stock prices and widespread investment. And it's interesting because Nick, who went to university to study literature and his dream was to become an author, actually, after he realized that he was not very good at being an author, decided to try his luck in Wall Street and started working with the stock market.
Yeah, so it's actually what took him to where he lives, because he's not a very successful broker, so he doesn't have the most fashionable house, but still it brings him into contact with all these people. So yeah.
It's interesting to know that the speculative boom and the fact that people bought so many things on credit is what actually triggered economic crash of 1929 and then the Great Depression that followed.
Although this is far from the concerns of the characters of the Great Gatsby, and so we are really in the full Roaring Twenties with all those crazy parties, and it feels very loud, full of movement, restless characters, and that's what I think makes the charm also of this novel.
Definitely, yeah.
So another way of answering the question, who is Gatsby, is to understand that Gatsby is a mirror of Fitzgerald's youth.
Yeah, definitely. Fitzgerald put a lot of himself in his work, not just The Great Gatsby, but also works like Tender is Denied or the short story Mayday, for example. So a little bit about Fitzgerald to help us understand who is Gatsby. So he was born in 1896. His family didn't have a ton of money, and that's something that troubled him throughout his whole youth because he felt like he didn't belong.
Exactly like Gatsby.
Really wanted to belong to the higher classes, to old money. He wanted to become friends with people who had money. He enrolled in Princeton in 1913. He left twice. He had a very fragile health, and so that made him leave the university a first time, and then he left a final time in 1917 because he decided to enroll during the First World War. It's interesting to know that he left without a degree. He didn't see any combat. He didn't even leave the US. He was stationed for a while in a town in Alabama, and that's where he met his future wife, Zelda.
Okay, so yes, when you have read Gatsby and you understand all these things about Fitzgerald, wow, it's crazy the similarities there are between Fitzgerald and Gatsby.
Yeah, it's even more, actually, because they fell in love, but Zelda didn't want to marry him until she was sure that he would be stable financially.
Okay.
So he went back to New York and did a few jobs in, I think he worked for a newspaper or something. And it's only after the publication of This Side of Paradise, his first novel in 1920, which is also reflection on the Roaring Twenties. Then the novel was a huge success. And so it allowed him to have money. And so that's when Zelda agreed to marry him. They married the same year in 1920 as well. And then they left for Paris a couple of years later. During that time, he published another novel, The Beautiful and the Damned, that was not received that well. It wasn't as much of a success as This Side of Paradise. And he wrote a lot of short stories. I read somewhere, don't remember if it was in A Movable Feast or in an essay or something, that he wrote short stories that were not amazing, but that he knew would be successful commercially, so that he could have money to sustain his lifestyle, because they pretty much had the lifestyle of Gatsby. They had tons of parties. They spent a lot of money on clothes and travels and things like that. And so he wrote all those short stories to have money and to be able to write better books as well. And it's a little bit after the move to Paris that he published The Great Gatsby in 1925.
Okay. Which was initially not commercially successful, but that had a better outcome later when the book was...
Yeah, but it was critically acclaimed. There is a passage in, I think, A Movable Feast where Hemingway praises the book. But yeah, an interesting story is that it became very successful during the Second World War, because it was part of all of those paperbacks that were sent to soldiers.
That's right.
In Europe, and that's how it became so successful. So there are a lot of similarities between Gatsby and
that's
Fitzgerald.
Really impressive when you put all this together. There is this desire for wealth and for higher social status, which is actually what drives Gatsby in the novel. We understand this. Also trying to conquer this woman that you are in love with and that will marry you until you have proved that until you have proved yourself. Excess. I mean,
they were known.
There's lives.
Yeah, Zelda and Scott were known for their wild parties. I think when he met Hemingway, he talked to him about the money that they had spent in 1 or 2 months, and I think it was the money that Hemingway could live on for like 2 or 3 years.
Incredible. Yeah. So this is what makes The Great Gatsby so nice to read, is you read about all those quantities of champagne, all those fruit that come in and then out of the house. Well, the oranges have been eaten, but it's incredible amounts of everything, like food, drinks, even flowers, everything to lights, also to make the house dazzling, really. And when I read it first, so I guess I was a student back then, I didn't really like it because I found it all unreal.
Okay.
But it's actually not unreal.
Yeah, no, apparently it was really what was happening in the US at that time for people that had a lot of money. Yeah.
Or who were gravitating around those kind of people. Yeah. And also what Gatsby has in common with Fitzgerald, it seems, is that he was quite romantic. Yeah.
I think we can say that both of them were very romantic and idealists. They had this very romantic notion of love and of writing as well.
Yeah.
Well, not Gatsby, but I think we can say that Gatsby's whole life is...
an idealization of who he wants to be, of the person he wants to be. I mean, there's this constant view of who he wants to embody that drives him and that prevents him from seeing what's real around him. So interesting, really. Third answer that we can give to explain who Gatsby really is that he's actually a very elusive main character.
Yeah.
I was quite frustrated actually when I started rereading the novel. I had forgotten that we actually do not get to really meet Gatsby until quite late in the novel. And I was wondering, oh my God, this story is actually not about Gatsby. But then you realize that everything is about Gatsby.
Yeah.
All these people at the beginning, they also, oh yeah, I know that man, Gatsby. But they all talk about him without really knowing much about him.
Yeah, they have all those wild guesses about who Gatsby is.
A murderer, German spy.
Yeah. Or if he even exists.
That's right.
A lot of people think that he's not real.
Yes, there's that funny scene where there is a guest in his mansion who is quite drunk. Yeah. And he's in the library and he's super happy to prove to the narrator that, oh, the books are real.
Yeah. He's one of those people who don't think that Gatsby is real.
That's right.
That they think it's just an idea.
Yeah. And even as a reader, you quite wonder if the Great Gatsby is a person or if it's just a myth in this society where you've got those dozens of people who gather for a party, but they actually do not know each other. So there are smaller parties within the bigger party. So yeah, but then we actually get to meet Gatsby. So through Nick Carraway, the narrator, who finally gets to chat with Gatsby at one of his parties.
So what I really liked about the book, one of the aspects that I really liked, is that we don't have the point of view of Gatsby, but we see Gatsby through the eyes of somebody who is not rich, who is not part of this circle.
No, he's just an outsider because he's the cousin of Daisy, one of the wealthy women in the novel.
And I really like the fact that he lives basically on the grounds of Gatsby's huge mansion, and he's very much outside looking in, which is a reference to the quote from the beginning of our episode. So Nick is, like we said, he's a young man of almost 30, I think.
Something like this, yeah.
So he decided to leave Chicago, or the Midwest anyway, to become a stockbroker, to try his luck at this new booming economy. And so he found this little house for nothing in West Egg. And because he's Daisy's cousin, he kind of gets sucked in this whole story.
Yeah, because he gets on really well with his with his cousin, and that's through him that we discover all the little secrets that these characters have. So it's like watching a play and knowing more than some of the characters on stage. So for example, we understand that Daisy's husband actually cheats on her.
Yes, and the nerve of him to bring Nick to see his mistress, knowing that he's Daisy's cousin, he was an appalling character.
Yeah, so Tom Buchanan is the name. Yeah. Wealthy guy.
No, he is wealthy.
He is wealthy, but what is he in? It's family money?
I think it's probably family money. He was a very successful polo player.
Yeah.
In his youth.
Yeah.
But he's not playing anymore, so he's probably relying on family.
His fame.
His fame, and he's probably coming from American aristocracy or something.
So Tom Buchanan, rich alpha male,
definitely,
who cheats on his wife, but then hates it when he discovers that his wife might have a lover.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Daisy, the narrator's cousin, strange little kind of a woman.
Yeah, I don't
really know what to make of her, actually.
No. You feel, I guess my feelings kind of change throughout the novel. At some moments, I feel almost pity for her with the way she's treated by her husband. And you feel for their love story with Gatsby when they are finally meeting again. That whole scene is very beautiful. And then towards the end, I'm very disappointed by her. She makes some choices that make her look very selfish. And
it's actually, hard to really understand. To some extent, Daisy herself could be the mirror of women at that time that is beginning to gain a little bit more control of their lives, but then at the same time, still expected to fit in some kind of frame. And eventually, she does not make the courageous, the bold choices that we could have expected her to make.
I think she's very unhappy with her life, but she's also very unwilling to change it and maybe to leave the comfort that
she's got that rich girl's side to her.
And I think with Tom comes connections with the right people, quote unquote, because Gatsby has a lot of money, but his friends or the people he works with, they are a bit. You understand that he probably works outside of the law, at least a little bit. So I think maybe she's afraid of that as well.
Yeah,
of the way people would see her if she left her husband as well.
Yeah, because Gatsby is an outsider as well. He does not live in the fashionable East Egg. He made his fortune in just 3 years.
Yeah.
But in 3 years, you do not become like the others.
Yeah, no.
So, yes, it's hard to decide if Daisy is a nice character or hateful little rich girl, selfish rich girl. But I guess that's what makes her an interesting character, because
definitely
complex character.
All the characters are very complex in this novel. They are very rich in this way, and it's
impossible to explain them away. Even the narrator. I wonder sometimes if he's not somehow an unreliable narrator.
Maybe.
Because he seems to be a nice guy, seeing all this from outside, but then to what extent is he the really honest guy that he seems to be?
I liked the way he was towards the end of the novel, how he handled the whole ending.
Yeah,
of
he really
the situation.
Was the one decent character.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
A character that is linked to both Nick and Daisy is Jordan.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about her at the beginning of the episode. She is very much the modern woman, and she's the woman that helps Gatsby meet Daisy again.
Yeah, so she's a friend of Daisy's.
Yeah.
And she becomes the lover of the narrator.
Yeah.
And so she acts as some kind of go-between.
Yeah.
Trying to help Gatsby meet Daisy again. And then the character that we've been talking about without really dealing clearly with him.
The Great Gatsby.
The Great Gatsby.
And in my opinion, he's really great. I think he's an amazing character.
He is some character indeed, because it's very hard to pinpoint his identity.
Yeah.
Because Jay Gatsby officially does not exist.
No.
It's not his real identity.
No.
So his real name is Gats. So he's very close to Gatsby, but he twisted it a little. He does not belong to the crowd.
No.
He stands out of the crowd even when there are all these people at his house. They are drinking. He's not.
No, yeah.
He navigates the different groups, chats with them, but never really seems to be perfectly integrated in those groups.
Yeah, and I think even, I'm pretty sure those people don't really know who he is. They probably don't know that he's Gatsby.
Well, I think that typically the narrator finds himself chatting with a man that he doesn't know, but finds charming indeed, and then there is the telltale old sport that signals that, wow, it is Gatsby.
Yeah.
So people meet him without knowing that it's him. He does not mingle with them. No one really knows what he does in life.
No.
Because there are those phone calls from Chicago, from all sorts of cities.
He's always on the phone.
He's always on the phone, so he seems to be a very busy man. Businessman, probably.
And you can, just with those phone calls, you can understand that he's not doing a legitimate business, because the calls come at all hours of the night, of the day. Yeah. So he doesn't keep normal business hours.
No, not at all. Yeah. But besides this elusive identity, there is something that is very clear, is that he is madly in love with Daisy. So they met earlier in their lives when they were quite young, both of them. They fell in love, apparently. Yeah. Then he had to go to the war. Yeah. And it seemed that Daisy forgot about him because she wanted... I think that her family wanted her to get married, or...
Yeah, I think she waited for him for a while, but when she didn't get any letters or anything...
Well, yeah, there was a problem with him when he came back, because for some reason he was sent mistakenly to Oxford. He had difficulty coming back to the US, And then in between, Daisy decided to get married. He didn't manage to arrive back in the US as quickly as he wanted.
Yeah.
And when he finally made it, she was married to Tom Buchanan.
And I think she was in love with her husband at first, definitely. I think until she realized that he was cheating on her, I think she was pretty much in love with him. And I think Gatsby realized that he couldn't have her as himself, and that he needed to create this whole persona, start earning a lot of money in order to win her love.
That's right. He had already dreamed of being someone else as a teenager before Daisy, but this really motivated him to become that rich person, extremely rich person, just to make sure that he might win her back.
Yeah.
And he actually refuses to see reality.
Yeah, definitely.
That is, he keeps telling himself that and repeating to others that Daisy does not love her husband. And he is very much mistaken in this, because it's not as clear as that.
Yeah.
And this is where he really looks like this tragic hero.
Yeah. He is definitely a tragic hero.
Because he refuses to see reality, which is probably the fault that condemns him, just as in a classical tragedy. And you feel that he cannot have a happy end, and that whatever good things he's going to do, good decisions that he's going to make, external forces are going to be here and to doom him to a tragic end.
His story really is tragic. He did everything he could. He bought this huge house opposite.
He was very consistent in all the choices he made to reach his one goal. That's right.
And because the only reason he had all those parties was because he was hoping that she would come to one of them and they could meet again.
That's what Jordan says to Nick, the narrator, at some point. That he was hoping that somehow she would join the crowd and come to his party, but she did not. So he had to resort to other schemes, like making sure that Nick would invite his cousin over to tea and then he would arrive and so on.
That scene is really poignant. What I really like is how confident he appears to everyone, especially to Nick. But when it comes to actually meet her again,
he becomes like a lovesick teenager. Yeah. And this is what makes him really endearing as well. Yeah. You have this character who has just one big goal, and that makes him very vulnerable. Yeah. Because he cannot be in full control. And what a big reflection love it is. Yeah. This is one of the few situations in which you cannot control things.
Yeah. So we have different kinds of loves that are portrayed in this book. You have the love of Gatsby and Daisy that I think we can call a doomed love, because they will never be happy together.
No.
Then we have Tom and Daisy, which I think represent a typical marriage of this time period, especially for wealthy people.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't really marry for love, even though I think Daisy was in love with her husband. I think in his own way, Tom probably loves her, but I think he also can't see himself not seeing other women. Yeah. I think it's probably normal for him. And it got them into a lot of troubles because they had to leave Chicago, I think, or another city because of a scandal of one of his affairs.
That's right. Yeah. And they're all this restless couple that we found as well in 10 Days a Night. Yep. Where they seem to always need to be having parties and to do things outside of their home. Yeah. And you even kind of forget that they have a kid.
Oh, yeah. They don't really take care of the kid. I think she appears once in the book.
And it does not even take a page. Yeah. So their life is actually built around seeing people, even if it's very hot, because the novel is taking place over a summer, I think. They are constantly going places. So yeah, a couple, but hard to say whether they really love each other, and it's not a very happy love. Not so love.
But they do end up together at the end.
Yeah. they stick together
Yeah.
in the midst of the trouble,
Yeah.
big trouble
Yeah.
that they find themselves in. Yeah. So another couple is Jordan and Nick.
Yeah.
Which is a very...
I feel like they portray the modern youth of the time period compared to Tom and Daisy that maybe portray kind of the old time.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, Jordan and Nick's relationship is short-lived.
Oh, yeah. But I don't know. I feel like they do have a relationship before marriage, which wouldn't have happened the century before.
Yeah.
So I think they embody the modernity of the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Tom and Myrtle.
So Myrtle being his mistress.
Yes.
She's the wife of a garage owner.
Yep.
Passion, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what they represent.
I think he loves her.
More than Daisy.
Probably because...
Or at least differently.
Yeah.
Probably because she's the person with whom he can be just...
himself.
I don't know if he is himself, because it's hard to really understand who he really is as well.
Yeah.
But he's just freely, passionately in love with her.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very carnal,
Yeah.
their love. But then there's more than that, because when she gets killed, he really, really feels upset.
Yeah, he's heartbroken.
Yeah.
There is a symbol that is, for me, incredibly beautiful. It's the green light, which I think embodies Gatsby's love, all of his hopes for his relationship with Daisy.
So it's the light that is emitted by the light at the end of
Daisy
and Tom's dock.
Yep.
And so it's just opposite Gatsby's mansion. And he had purposefully chosen this place because he could see the house and the light. And for him, the light represents this person that he wants to attain and gain back in his life. And it's just a light. So it's actually impossible to seize. It's impossible to bottle. It's impossible to actually touch, smell, or anything. And it's a very good representation of this illusion that he has created, like a happy life with Daisy. So I guess that we can say that this is what sums up the whole Gatsby persona, the fact that he's unable to take reality and prefers living with his illusion that he is going to get that love back. And
definitely.
That's what drove his whole life, and he was very consistent following this, but it was just an illusion.
Yeah.
So the elusive Gatsby is also full of illusions.
Yeah.
So after this incredibly rich novel with its set of complex characters, what else can we read?
I would recommend, firstly, the first novel of Fitzgerald, which is This Side of Paradise, because it is known, and at the time period, it was recognized as a representation of the Roaring Twenties. So definitely read this one. It has a lot of short stories about the Roaring Twenties as well. Mayday is a very good one. It's the one I did my master's dissertation on. It's very interesting. It also takes place in New York.
So is there a specific collection of short stories that he published?
Tales of the Jazz Age. Then I think I can also write The Sun Also Rises by Hemingway, which takes place in Europe, but is also about the 20s and everything that was happening at that time. Do you have any recommendations?
To read some other author besides Fitzgerald and Hemingway, I think John Dos Passos is an author that can also be interesting to read. For example, Manhattan Transfer, which is about New York City in the 1920s. So this would be another take on this period and setting, and this energy, diversity, contradictions as well. So that's probably another interesting take on all these people at that time.
Okay, great. So thank you for your time. If you want to join us for our next episode, we will focus on 1920s in Paris this time, with Hemingway's A Movable Feast.
So thank you, Mimi, and thank you everyone for listening. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Hey, not so fast. Do you know what would help a lot? It's if you would leave a 5-star rating or even a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That would enable us to help other readers find their own favorites. That's it for today. Bye.